Tara Nolan from Nolan Financial. And if you're new to the show, I just want to welcome you and just let you know that if you have any questions, you can give Chris and I a call at 719-210-4242. And if you're watching the show live, then obviously this is not Chris. This is my good friend and co-host, Tony Shore. Chris is my husband and partner.
Awesome.
And I realize now, Tony, that now that we're doing it visually, that could be confusing for people.
Yeah, because you say with myself and Chris, my partner, and I'm like, nope, I'm Tony. So
right. Just to
people might get confused, but our names are down there, so that helps.
It does.
That helps.
But you can also visit the website at www.taraenolan.com. While you're there, you can see what Chris and I actually look like and check out what we do. And you know, we're getting a new website coming out within the next month. I'm loving it. It's going to be really exciting. But while you're there, one of the main things is that you can click on the radio page and you can click on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so that you can listen to the podcast later, because this information is really important. We feel really deeply that a successful retirement plan starts with education. You can't know everything, but you can know good questions to ask. And so that's what this show is all about, is getting your brain primed so that you have good questions to ask. Yeah. And don't hesitate, though, to set up a face-to-face meeting if you want. And we're also doing them virtually, still face-to-face, but, you know, we've gotten very flexible with this pandemic. And we're going to be talking a little bit today. We always try to do something fun with the show. And so we're going to weave a little bit of football in. And I was just talking to Tony that it's perfect because with the new book that I'm writing, Wealth is a Team Sport, I use football analogies a lot. So it's a natural fit.
Yeah, I love it. I love this idea, Tara, of working it in. You kind of turned a financial draft and a little parody there, or play on the NFL draft, which, you know, you mentioned it, but it is crazy how big the NFL draft has become. You have to hand it to the marketing and branding of the NFL organization, because the draft used to be nothing. Nobody cared, or if you did, you had to read about it in the paper the next day, like you say, or you know, when the sports radio the next day would say, here's who was drafted, or sports TV. But now it's an event second only to the Super Bowl, where cities vie to have the NFL draft hosted in their city, and it's a week long. They have a week long of events, or at least a few days of events. Around it, they have live music. It gets live coverage on television, and people do mock drafts and have draft parties to watch it. I mean, it's become this huge thing. And when I was younger, it was not a thing at all. You found out about it after the fact. So I am surprised at how it's grown, and a lot of people love it, but I don't think you have to enjoy football to get something out of today's show, because you also have to, I think, you know, like you say, we're going to talk about a lot of improving your finances picks for today's financial draft, right?
Well, absolutely, Tony. And I can guarantee you don't have to know the difference between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because I am not the football aficionado in the family. That would be my husband, Chris.
Right.
And I can tell you, Tony, he's way more into college football.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah.
To the point that there's not a lot of sense of humor about it.
Oh, wow.
Which I have learned.
He takes it for, don't give him a hard time about his team if they're losing or something. That's tough. I'm more pro football guy than college football. I grew up in Minnesota, so I'm a big Vikings fan. I know a lot of our listeners are probably Denver Broncos fans, but I love the NFL. But this show will just be fun for everyone. So the anticipation is killing me. Why don't you make your first selection in the Improve Your Finances draft?
Okay, drum roll, please. For
the next one, I'll have an actual drum roll. We'll use that.
We'll do that. So the first select for improving your finances is negotiate your salary. And this is simple, but it's a really powerful step. And you want to keep a running tally of your professional accomplishments and those accomplishments that have helped you be more valuable. But here's the thing, Tony, is you are already enough. And I have a personal story. My little brother, when he was getting out of the military and he was going for his first job, they had what they call pay bands. And so the pay salary was anywhere between $60,000 and $80,000.
Sure.
And part of the interview process is he had to just sign up for what he thought he should get paid. And he didn't know anything, Tony, right? He had just always had a job. He'd never actually had to like apply for a job.
Sure.
In the military, you just do what you're told. And he was
Right.
going to put down like 60,000. And I had to really talk him up. And I'm like, ask for the most and make them come down.
Yes, exactly.
And Tony, he was floored because he couldn't quite go all the way to 80,000, but he asked pretty high up there. And Tony, they gave him what he asked for.
Of course. It's you never get. I remember when I was first started to do radio promotions for record companies. In other words, I would call radio stations and try to get them to play an artist single on the radio and get them to report it to the charts, because the purpose is to get the song on the national chart and then move it up.
Right.
So I would call radio stations, and I'm a young guy at this point. I had only been out of high school I had been out of high school 2 or 3 years, and I got this job in LA doing radio promotions. Loved it, right? The dream come true. And luckily I had a great boss. His name was Mike McLean, great guy. He was a fairly young guy, but older than me, but he would stand by me and he listened to me make a call, and he goes, "Tony, what are you trying to get them to do? What would be the ultimate goal?" And I go, "Well, to have them report the song when they report to the charts at number 1." And he goes, "Didn't hear you ask that. Didn't hear you say, please report this song at number 1." And he goes, "Even if they might not out the door report this at number 1, even if it's a new single, you say, hey, really, you're going to want to report this at number 1 because of this and this." And you don't get what you don't ask for is the point.
That's so important, Tony, but we're also afraid. Most of us are gun shy because we don't want to be rejected, or we want to be modest, or
we don't want to hear no.
Right. And it's just a great first thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Our next selection.
Oh, let's do a drum roll.
You want to start accumulating your wealth as soon as possible, because we've all heard of this thing about compounding. Compounding happens over time. So the sooner you're working for your money and the sooner you can develop a little pot of money that's working for you, then the more time it has to keep working for you. And so that's just like, it just makes common sense. It's just kind of the way it works. So the best way to do that is just use all the tools that are available to you. If you're working and you have a 401k, I'll foot stomp this every time I do. Make sure you're getting all the matching, because not everybody's doing that. Ask if they can do a Roth version so that you can be growing that money tax-free. And you want to be just doing all the little things you can to start accumulating that wealth. You also want to be smart about your debt. And there's going to be things that you're going to need a car to drive. You're going to need a place to live. So those are some of the things in debt that you're going to need, but be paying attention to, the things you're spending on your credit card, and just make sure that, do you need those things, or is that money that you could be investing so that your older self thanks your younger self?
Yeah. And again, some more great reasons to build a strong relationship with an experienced financial services professional. And since we're talking about football here today, Tara, I would argue that a good financial professional like yourself is really like a great football coach, right? They're there to help you get the most out of yourself.
Absolutely, Tony, because the coach knows all the players that are available and help get everything organized. And you're the owner of your team, but you're going to have that team of experts to help you make those choices, because it's not that there's no choices. The problem is that there's so many choices.
There are so many. Yeah, the options. People think things are just like check the box and move on. Oh, so Social Security, check the box, move on. Medicare, check the box, move on. Retirement's easy. 401k. Check. I've checked the boxes. I've checked 3 boxes. I'm done. All those things are so complicated, and there's so much more. It's just, there are so many choices, and you really need to dig deep and make right choices, and you don't need to do it on your own, I think is the point. You got to think of yourself as Joe Montana. You're a great player, and you have a great financial services professional like yourself, not to name names, Tara Nolan. But you're like the coach, Bill Walsh. So I think think that's really important. So what's the next selection?
All right, the next selection. And this is a good one.
All right, wait, I'm going to do a drum roll.
Is you want to consider a second job. Now, no, wait, hear me out. Is I know that you're like, I already work a job. But a
Yeah.
second job, though, Tony, this can be something like the best second job I see a lot of people have is they start owning rental properties, for example. And so it doesn't
Mm,
take up a whole lot of your time, but it's
That's
something that
true.
is going to build you some equity. You're leveraging your credit. So it's going to be just giving you that extra source of income as you're working. And your second gig doesn't always have to be unpleasant. And this is like if you have your main job, your second hustle, your side hustle can be something that you enjoy. So think about your hobbies and your interests and your talents and see if there's something that you would enjoy doing anyway. And then if there's a way that you get paid for that. Because all things equal, you know what you have a limited amount of time. And if you're going to be doing something for fun anyway, see if there's a way to get paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm glad you made the distinction, though. I think we sometimes assume that a second job is going to be a slog or
Right.
work. But, that's likely not the case if you find something to do, especially if it's a second job. Find something to do that you're good at or that you love. And then it's just extra money in the pocket and it's something to do. It keeps you going. I think that's a great idea.
When I have time, Tony, I like to give horseback riding lessons. And I don't always have time, but that's something I'm doing it anyway. I'm riding and teaching. It helps me learn. And then if I can get paid a little bit and offset the cost of my hobby, then it's a great thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's a good way to look at it. That's a good example right there.
So I have those every now and again, especially when
You
it
have them all
involves
the
horses.
time. Yeah, that's true. Horses. Horses.
Oh, this next one is something that I really should look at doing for myself.
What's that?
So the next selection,
Oh, are we gonna do the drum roll?
I think
Here
so,
we go.
is to get rid of cable.
Oh,
And
yes.
see, Tony, this is something like when I was single before I was married, I didn't have, I had a TV that I could put like VCR, DVDs, or,
Yeah.
the big tapes in.
Tapes. Yeah.
And
VHS tapes.
Chris is a total tech guy. So left to my own devices, I probably could do this, but I can tell you with Chris, probably not. But we start, it's the mission creep, right? Because
Yeah.
they've gotten really good at, because now we have Netflix and
Yep.
then we have Hulu, but
Yep.
now there's some shows I really want to see on Disney
Yep. Disney
that I
Plus.
haven't, but I'm still being too cheap. I'm like, no, I'm not buying that. And then there's things on HBO Max. So they're
Yep.
kind of spreading themselves out again. So I'm like, I don't, I have more shows than I could possibly watch, but the one show
Yeah.
I want to watch is over here. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the problem. Again, it's mission creep. You're right. But the good news is you can cut cable and have a few streaming services. And the great thing about streaming services is there's usually no contracts, so
right.
you can cancel at any time. It's easy to cancel and it's easy to sign back up. So there is a lot more flexibility where that allows you to not subscribe to all services all the time and save some money that way. And so that is a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, if listeners can't do without live TV or local TV, there are streaming services that are less expensive than cable, like YouTube TV. That's what my wife and we use YouTube TV, and then we rotate between four major streaming services. We have Netflix, and then right now we don't have Hulu, we have Disney Plus, but we might switch back, or so we do that, and a lot of people game it like that. I mean, if you want to take the time, if you have the time, especially if you're retired, you can do that. You can watch all the shows you want on Netflix, cancel it, get Hulu, watch the shows on Hulu. People do that. I know people that do that. Well, this has been a great show so far. Why don't you let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you?
So sure, Tony. So everyone can visit my website at www.taraenolan.com. But definitely, if you want to set up that complimentary call that we set aside for the first 20 callers, the number is 719-210-4242. And, for today's show, it's all about people wanting to get that second opinion to go, okay, here's everything I'm doing. What am I missing? And this is where Chris and I really like to sit down and help you look at your plan and then look at those gaps and go, how do we fill in all those gaps? Because you want to be successful and we want to help you be successful. So that number, Tony, is 719-210-4242. Give Chris and I a call to set up that complimentary appointment.
All right. Well, that sounds great, Tara. Thanks for that. And listeners, as a reminder, this is Nolan Financial Radio, and our host is Tara Nolan. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore. Now, this has been a great show so far. Let's keep it going. What's your next selection in the 2021 Improve Your Finances draft?
Okay, so this one is a little less fun.
Okay.
But it's very important. And so this next selection is you want to co-manage your money. And what this means is it happens, Chris and I do it as well, Tony, is it often falls to one spouse or partner to be managing the money.
Yep.
And for Chris and I, like I'm involved in all like the fun money decisions, but like with the daily paying the bills, if you had to sit me down in front of a computer and say, okay, do you have the logins for all the different places for all the bills we have to pay? I don't, Tony. And so
Right.
if like the favorites doesn't work on the computer, I would be in for a long day of trying to figure out passwords and bill
Sure.
pays. And this is true for, I think, almost everybody out there is
Yep.
It's just, we're all so busy. And it's not that someone's better at it or worse at it. It's just the natural thing. Like Tony, with our military families, it becomes a big challenge is when one spouse deploys, the other spouse is running the entire house. And then when the person comes back from deployment, all of a sudden the person's like, why are you in my house and in my business? So
that's so funny.
This
but
happens because
Yeah.
almost every family, both people in the couple work.
Yep.
And it's just really important to make sure that both people are at least have some kind of a book of key passwords or websites or something, because the moment when you need to have it, that's not the time to be figuring it out.
Right, exactly. And I think this is another great opportunity to mention why it's so necessary to work with a financial professional like yourself, Tara, because that way you have both parties in the relationship have an advocate who's going to answer their questions, address those concerns, and you're an outside neutral person that they can do that with, that can keep them both on the same page. And so I really think that's huge. That's a huge value as to what a financial person like yourself can offer to your clients.
Definitely, Tony. It's because it's all about those little things that you can do now, making choices today that make your life easier in the future. That's what it's all
Sure.
about.
And I'm glad you brought that up. Now, what's the next selection? And we can forego the drum roll on this one.
Sure. So the next selection is to go ahead and just calculate your net worth. Have you ever done it? A lot of people haven't.
No, I really haven't.
It's very simple, but it's a powerful step that if you take this step immediately, you start to understand where you sit. And good, bad, or ugly, it's just good to know. So to calculate your net worth, Tony, you just simply take up all your assets and add them up, and then you subtract all your debts. And the amount that you're left over, that's going to give you a picture of where you are right now and where you need to go. And it's really important for people who are like paying off a house and paying off student loans. And sometimes it can feel like you're in this hole that you're never going to climb out of. But if you take a look at that net worth, it really syncs up for your brain to go, oh, okay, here's what I have. Here's what my bills are. And then you can start to look at your debts and go, is there anything I can control in my debt? And then there's just a thing. It's one of those exercises that you do. Your brain sees it, and then you start working on it. But if you never look at it, and it's always just like chaos everywhere, it's easy just to kind of like being on this wheel that's spinning and spinning, and you're never making any traction.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I can see that. I think you've got a good point there. And I think the concept of net worth, it's often chalked up as, oh, that's only for the wealthy, or I don't have enough money to worry about net worth. But no matter how big or small your paycheck is, or how well or off you think you're doing, you should know your net worth.
it's just a good data point that helps you get where you're trying to go.
Yep.
And it's very important. So now this next one, Tony, I think this next one is really important for people to listen to. And this is You want to avoid extreme personal finance strategies. Like that bell curve. You want to be in the
Yep.
sweet spot in the middle, not on
Yep.
either end. And
Yes.
and this is super important because there's a lot of people out there that just have it ingrained in their head from being kids that they've got to be very frugal. And what I see though, Tony, is sometimes people in that mindset will be, what is it? Penny wise, but pound foolish.
Yeah.
And they'll do things that make their lives miserable. Like I had a client that when the family when mom and dad were fighting about money, they would do things like, well, that's it. We're not going to have air conditioning because it's too expensive. Or I can even remember as a kid, like driving around with my grandmother. My grandmother refused to turn on the air conditioning in the car because she said it was too expensive and she couldn't afford it. And and these are
For the
serious
two
things.
cents of gas that she would have used, the 2 cents she
Right.
saved.
And it's like you're sweating and it's little things like that that are the intention behind it is to try to be smart about your money and save your pennies, but that doesn't help you get where you're going to go. Or it's been called the latte factor, right? If you just stop drinking coffee, then you could save enough money for retirement. So the intention behind it is good, is to start looking
Yes.
at the things you do and see if are there things you're doing that you maybe don't need to be doing so you can
Right.
start saving, because we want to take advantage of that compound interest. But at the same time, you got to live your life today.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that you want to be wise. You can be frugal, but you want to be strategic, but try not to be extreme. And so, Tony, this is one of the things that Chris and I like to sit down with people is we can be that outside observer to look at what you're doing and give you that frame of reference to go, that makes sense. That one you might give yourself a break on.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another reason. Work with a financial professional, build that financial strategy, and I hate to bring up the B word, have a budget or a spending plan. I think that's a great way to build that roadmap for the future while making sure that your life right now isn't completely full of financial sacrifice. I think that balance is what you're looking for.
Balance, that's the key thing.
Yep. That's good.
There's no more balance, and it depends. The two
It depends.
two most frustrating answers.
Yes.
But so now, Tony, this next selection, actually, I think this probably should have been the number one. Now that I'm
Okay.
looking at it,
All right.
is you got to have an emergency fund. You
Yeah,
got to
that's
have an
huge.
emergency fund, and the reason is for emergencies. And I think a lot of us today, we've gotten comfortable with, well, my credit card is going to be that emergency fund. And the goal of having an emergency fund is to prevent you from having to put things on a credit card. But the
Mhm.
thing is, life is just uncertain. I mean, if there's anything that the pandemic taught us is we went from having our whole year plan to like staying at home. So you can't predict that.
Right.
And having that emergency fund, the rule generally is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. It just gives you like this peace of mind and this feeling of zen that you can have. So when life throws whatever curveballs at you, that it will,
Yeah.
you don't go into panic mode or start like running up debt on your credit card, which just sends you into this cycle of despair.
Right. Yeah, the credit card debt, that's a whole, we could spend a couple of shows talking about that and its impact and what you need to do and not do. But yeah, you want to avoid debt, and especially credit card debt, and that's where the emergency fund comes in, because when you need to replace the refrigerator or get the car repaired, unexpected medical expense, where is that money going to come from? And if you have a plan, that's really great, Tara. Now, I think I'm ready for the next selection. What do you have for us?
This one's a tough one, and I have seen this with several clients that have come to me, Tony, is you got to learn when to say no. And I loved it, actually. My father-in-law, when I first met him, he had this whole book, and every page was a tear out page that said no. and they were pretty and decorative in different ways, but it's really hard, especially when your family member or friend comes to you for a loan or even just a handout. It's really hard to say no. But Tony, I had a client that came to me, and they were the nicest couple. They were very responsible, very put together. And the thing that was their problem was their son had just been making these poor financial decisions, and they had taken out a second mortgage on the home. They were doing things trying to clean up after him. But Tony, their son was almost 30 at this point. And so they weren't being able to actually help him, right? Because he just kept making bad decisions. So what they were doing was robbing themselves of their retirement plan, which in the end was not going to help their son anyway, right? Because once they
Right.
got themselves in such a hole, it's almost selfish, but if you take care of yourself, that's one of the best things you can do for your family.
Right. Right.
And it's
Yeah.
hard. It's really hard watching your kids or someone that you know struggle. And Tony, I deal with this all the time with my mom too. She makes money and she saves up her nest eggs. And then I try to go, okay, now we're going to invest that. And then we've got some strategies over here for how you can give money to the family, but let's run it through the strategies first. And Tony, she can't take it. She just wants to write a check because she just loves that giving the money. And it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, you're making a decision that's going to keep you poor when I have this strategy that's going to help you.
Yeah.
But it's such a
It's
strong
hard.
emotional drive to take care of people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people out there listening have probably had that experience, one side or the other. And I think saying no is important. It's not always easy. Like you say, if somebody comes to you for a loan or a handout, you got to say no. And especially, obviously family and friends. But now co-hosts, if they come to you, if your radio show co-host comes to you, Tara, that's when you actually say yes. Uh, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So,
Oh, I love it.
at some point you have to look out for your own financial self-interest, and I think that's important. What's the next selection?
So this next one, Tony, this is super important. It's about finances and health. And I think I've talked with you about it. So I think
Yep.
I've lost about 25 pounds now since I
That's
started last
amazing. That's
October.
awesome.
And
That's
and I
awesome.
feel so much better. And it's not a diet anymore. It's just how we eat. And
The lifestyle. Yeah.
we've gotten off the very strict. So we have been out to eat a couple times. But even though we're going out to eat, I'm being very careful about what I select. And the thing is, Tony, is I didn't realize how much money we were spending just eating out.
You save a
And
lot
so,
of money not eating out. It's huge.
and I like to tip well. So we were eating out a lot. And then I was eating stuff that wasn't good for me. So
Mhm.
it's by staying home and cooking, you're taking care of, I mean, you're saving money, and that's not even the primary driver, but I feel so much better. But I tell you what, Tony, it was a whole like learning curve in terms of our habits. We had to relearn how to go to the grocery store. We had to relearn how to shop. And, it's a whole different rhythm of when you have fresh things, you have to go to the grocery store more often. So, but anyway, it's just really, there's things that you can do for yourself that require developing good habits. And so eating healthy takes some good steps to eat better. Just like with money, that those little baby steps that you take in developing good habits will help you start to save and get that compounding interest going. And sometimes doing something that's good for yourself, it's a little hard at first.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Yeah, it can be hard. And I think that's great. Now, guess what? We're out of time. It
Oh,
happened again. It flew by. But great show. I love the 2021 Improve Your Finances draft, Tara. Is there anything else you want to add before we go today?
well, just if you're listening to the show today, we're giving you a lot of things to look out for. But the big picture is your takeaway is you should have a plan, because
Yep.
life will throw curveballs at you. And if you have a plan, it's a lot easier to adjust and, avoid all the obstacles on the field. So I would just say, give Chris and I a call, 719-210-4242. If you're really ready to take that serious look at what you're doing and make sure, and Tony, it's not the hits you see coming that are going to get you. It's the things that you miss on your blind side. That's what you want to look out for.
Yep. Exactly. Well, Tara, great show today. Listeners, that does it for today's episode of Nolan Financial Radio with our host, Tara Nolan.
Join us for another episode of Nolan Financial Radio. Take care, and we'll talk with you next time.